Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to Connecticut HorrorFest. Christine, we sincerely hope that you've had a great time. We know we have. I'd like to welcome you to our final panel of the evening. Without further ado, Mr. George Romero.
Thank you.
So you guys have heard of this guy before, right? Yeah, quick story. Yesterday when George got to the hotel, Rob, Christine, and I were there to greet him, and he looked over to us and he said, "Hi, I'm George." Rob goes, "We know who you are." But after talking with him today, that's just the kind of guy he is. Seems to be a very down-to-earth person, which is amazing for his body of work. We all know what he's done and what he's put on the screen, and we all thank him. So, thank you. So that said, I am going to, I'm sure a lot of you were here last year, you saw me up here with Doug Bradley, and I asked Doug a lot of questions. This year I want to do it a little differently. I know that you're all here for George, not to hear my stupid questions, so I'm going to ask him a few, and then I want you guys to really take the floor. I'm going to be passing the mic around for you guys to ask some questions, because that's what you're here for. You want to hear from the man himself. So that said, let me start by just saying 1968, a year that I wasn't around yet, but a year that will live forever in the hearts and minds of horror fans. Night of the Living Dead. How did it happen? The short version.
We had the short version, okay, yeah. This started at a 5,000 watt raise. No, a bunch of us, friends of mine and myself, always loved movies and got together right out of college, actually. And in those days, cities, we were in Pittsburgh. I went to college at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. In those days, there was no such thing as videotape. So cities the size of Pittsburgh had film laboratories, full-service film labs, 8, 16, 35. And the news back then was on film. And my very first job was just bicycling those newsreels from the lab over to KDKA and the TV stations. And the editors at these labs, the news would be edited by these journeyman editors. They were like reporters in the old newsroom with cement, liquid cement on the splices. And they would edit the newsreel.
Yeah.
And that's really where I learned how to do it. Okay. How it worked. And so I got together with some friends of mine and myself, and we really all wanted to make film. And we started a commercial production company to do beer commercials. And that was also kind of unique, because in those days, beer commercials were, Bob Prince, the voice of the Pittsburgh Pirates, would, on the air, take a slug and say, "Drink, dude." Can't do that anymore.
No.
But, so we set up we introduced the idea, in Pittsburgh anyway, of filmed television. And became successful enough to, buy equipment and lights and all the stuff that we needed. And it was one of the commercials that we shot for Calgon enabled us to buy a 35 millimeter camera. And once we had 35, we said we should really seriously think about trying to make a movie. And we tried unsuccessfully to promote one film, which was sort of a high-minded, artsy thing. And weren't with no success. And we decided to do something commercial. But we also wanted to do something good and have some kind of you know, a message underneath.
Sure.
And that's where Night of the Living Dead came from. I had written a story that the film wound up being based on. And John Russo and I wrote the script based on that story.
Right.
And that was it. We kicked in $600 a piece, 10 of us. So on $6,000, we started to shoot.
Yeah.
And then gradually, there was a Chiller Theater show in Pittsburgh at the time. Billy Billy, who recently passed away, and he plugged us. This was 11 o'clock, or after the news, 11:30. Chiller Theater, you know, like Zachary.
Yeah.
And he plugged us every week, and that really enabled us to raise money from investors. We wound up, before we were done, we wound up raising about $60,000. And that's what it cost. That's what it cost cash.
Yep.
And we had to defer. So it came in at $114,000. I don't know if you could do that today, not in 35.
No.
You could do it on video. But,
Yeah. Well, people make movies on their cell phones.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that wasn't as quick as you wanted it to be, but that's the story.
No, that's a great story. Safe to say, or to guess, that you didn't really expect the level of success that it's achieved?
We never did, no,
No.
absolutely not. But, you know, it actually went out and made money in its first appearance in drive-ins and neighborhood theaters and all that, and actually returned some dough.
Right.
It returned about $700,000.
Yep.
So, you know, we were sitting there saying, hey, this is an easy business. You know, of course, it turned out not to be.
Sure.
And then it turned out that we didn't have a copyright because our title was Night of the Flesh Eaters. And when we got a distributor finally, Walter Reed, they said there was already a film out called The Flesh Eaters. So they said, well, let's look for a different title.
Yep.
And it was their title. Night of the Living Dead was Walter Reed's title.
Oh, okay.
But when they took our title off, we stupidly had put the copyright bug on the title. And when the title came off, the copyright went away.
Right.
And so the film was in public domain.
Yep.
And it took about 2 years or almost 3 years for people to notice that. And after that, forget about it.
All right. Right.
So, but let me tell you, I think partly, to answer your question about why it was so successful, I think partly because anybody could show it without paying royalties.
That's right. Yeah. We actually, Horror News Network showed it a couple of years ago at a theater in Seymour, Connecticut, right? And one of obviously we chose it because it's a legendary film, but also because public domain. And I'm sure there's plenty of people all across the world that do the exact same thing.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true.
Yeah.
But then I think the other reason was that people started, the French noticed it first. Cahiers du Cinema wrote about it as if it was important. And what we wanted the film to be about was the idea that even faced with a world crisis, you know, a game changer, complete game changer, these people that are trapped in the farmhouse still are arguing among themselves and arguing stupidly about petty things instead of addressing the problem. That was our message. All of a sudden, we didn't realize that we were making a racial film, even though Dwayne, the lead actor, is African American, was African American. When John and I wrote the script, we wrote him as, think in our mind he was a white guy.
Yep.
And but Dwayne was the best actor who auditioned for the role. And so we stayed. And what we didn't do was we didn't change the script. But there's no race inherently in the script.
Right.
But this is a true story. Some of you may have heard it. We had the very first print of Night of the Living Dead. Russ Streiner and I were driving it to New York, and we had the very first copy in the trunk of the car, when it was still called Night of the Flag Week. And on the way to New York, on the car radio, we heard that Martin Luther King had been assassinated. And all of a sudden, even in our minds, we realized that this was going to absolutely make this film a racial statement.
Right.
And that, I think, is the other reason that it became as successful as it was.
Right. Right. And that's incredible. It wasn't even meant to be that way. It just happened to be that way. It's credited, rightfully so, as being the birth of the zombie genre. You know, there were other zombie films before it, but they were different.
But they were voodoo.
Right, exactly. They were the Haitian,
Haitian.
right, White Zombie with Bela Lugosi, etc., which is also what we showed on the double feature when we did Night of the Living Dead was White Zombie. But so you're credited as, you know, giving birth to the zombie genre as we know it. It went on to Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, and so on. Out of all of the Dead films, which one is your favorite? Is it still Night?
No, my favorite is Day.
Okay, okay.
I think it was such a wonderful time. It wasn't. It was dreadful conditions in that mine and all that. But the cast and the crew, everybody that worked on that film was 100% with it.
Yep.
And loving it. I think Tom Savini did absolutely his best work.
Genius.
You know, I just love it. And I love how arch it is and how way over the top it is. And that message too of, you know, the system's completely falling apart. And science is crazy. And the army is, you know, you can't trust, and it's it's really it remains my favorite zombie.
Okay, all right. In sort of a crazy way, you brought me to another question. You brought up Day of the Dead. I'm going to go to Greg Nicotero, who was in Day of the Dead, and is currently involved in a lesser-known TV show. I'm not sure if anybody here has heard of it, The Walking Dead. What are your thoughts on the success of that show and that show in general?
Well, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't pissed off.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah, no.
You know, it's of course, you know, not just because of the show and what it is, and the fact that it's sort of so close to what we were doing, but more than that, between The Walking Dead and Brad Pitt, they basically killed they killed zombies for low budget filming. And after I did Land of the Dead, even though I really liked the way Land of the Dead turned out, but I never ever wanted to do another $20 million movie. You know, Dennis Hopper's cigar budget was more than we had more than the entire budget of Night of the Dead.
Right, I'm not surprised.
So I felt that it was completely unnecessary, and so I fled and went right back to the Diary of the Dead and Survival on $2 million and $2.5 million respectively. Now, you can't pitch a $2 million zombie film. Hollywood has glommed onto it, and they think you have to spend $100 million, $200 million, and nobody wants, you can't get that, you know, low budget money.
Right.
Not for a zombie.
Right.
So I basically, you know, I said, okay, And I wrote a comic book instead, sort of biding my time, waiting for zombies to die. Actually still working on the comic book. The big one with all the issues comes out, I think, this month or next month. So,
Excellent.
And I'm, writing. I have 2 screenplays that I'm working on, and we'll see. I'm still waiting for those zombies to die away. So we can maybe make another little zombie film. I'd love to make it on.
Right. Well, I'm sure everybody here would love to see you make another one. We'd love to speak for everybody. My final question before I pass this off to everybody in the audience is about a movie that is near and dear to my heart, one of my favorites of all time. We've already discussed it today. Creepshow. Stephen King on that movie?
Well, Steve, actually Warner Brothers introduced me to Steve because I made a film called Martin, a little sort of, is it? And they had bought the rights to Salem's Lot, one of them. And Martin was in a little film festival in Utah, which is the festival that grew up to become Sundance. At that time, it was called the USA Film Festival. And Warner Brothers execs saw Martin at that festival and contacted me and said, in typical studio fashion, you put 2 and 2 together. Martin's about a vampire in a small town. We just bought a book about a vampire in a small town. Maybe we should put these guys together. So they did. They bought me a plane ticket and sent me up to Maine. And Steve and I hung out for like 3 days. And we really got along. But Steve said, he said, they're going to want to take this. I don't want to mess around with Salem's Lot. I think it's too good. I don't want the studio to get involved with it. He said, but if we want, I'd love to work with you, so let's do this. And he gave me a copy of The Stand.
Yeah.
And he signed it, and he said, let's do this movie together. So his signatures. Anyway, we remained friends. And Warner Brothers wound up doing Salem's Lot for television, which pissed Steve off. And there was still the possibility of The Stand. And so we started to work on a screenplay for The Stand.
Okay.
And Steve again didn't want to emasculate it. He didn't want to have to cut it. So we wound up with like a 3-hour screenplay. And nobody wanted to touch it.
Right.
In the meantime, Steve came in to do a little cameo in a film that I made called Night Riders. And we were hanging out. And I said, I had an idea. I wanted to do an anthology film, but I wanted to do it about movies. I wanted to do one in black and white, 1:3:3 format, one widescreen, one 3D, five little sort of short stories using the different formats that have been used in horror film. And Steve said, no, you know what? We both love comics. Let's make it a comic book instead, and then you don't have to worry about the formatting and all of that. And I said, great. And he said, I'll take a whack at a script. And 3 of the stories, I think, were previously published in collections.
Yeah.
And then 2 or 3, I don't remember. But, and then he wrote the others. And I'm telling you, within 3 weeks, I had a screenplay. I mean, Steve is like, he works, he gets up in the morning at 6, writes till 10, his day is finished. But he writes so much in those couple of hours. It's fun to do. So prolific. Yeah. And that's where it came from. That's how it came about.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. And that was another Tom Savini You guys have a long history
Yeah,
together.
we did,
You and
yeah.
Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did you? I'm sorry. I know I said I was going to pass it to you, but things keep coming, and I'm kind of asking questions that I've never heard the answers to, even though they might be out there. What did you think of Tom Savini's 1990 Night of the Living Dead?
I liked it very much.
Okay.
I think it doesn't get enough credit.
I agree.
Probably because, well, first it wasn't distributed very well. And then, there was a lot of like pushback because why remake Night of the Living Dead?
Right.
And the real reason that we remade it was because we were trying to reestablish some kind of copyright. And of course, we wound up getting a copyright on that film,
right,
but not the original. So, you can't win that battle.
Yeah, I always really liked I liked his retelling. I like how he just tweaks it a little, made Barbara a little stronger, and I always liked it. I'm glad to hear that you liked it as well.
Yeah, I really liked it.
Excellent.
I actually wrote the script.
Yep.
So it was completely, I was completely with it the whole time. I wasn't some guy that was naysayer, So
right.
I wanted to. A lot of people that wrote about it said, why would you?
Excellent, excellent. Well, guys, with that, I will keep good to my promise. Let me see some hands. Okay, that's the first one I saw over here. You have to speak up into this thing.
Hi, George. So, I understand that you played yourself in Call of Duty, Call of the Dead. So, I'm just wondering, how did you get involved with that, and what did you think about being yourself?
It's not really myself. I'm not that way. It was great. I mean, it was just. I would love to design a video game someday, but nobody ever wants me to. Nobody wants my input.
I find that hard to believe.
Go find a buyer.
Done.
I'll work on it. I'll work on it.
Okay.
I promise.
No,
What else we got? Okay, I saw her first.
anyway, it was easy to do. Not my voice. All they did was. They didn't even do motion capture. I couldn't make those moves myself. But it was basically, I was basically hands-off on the whole thing. Go ahead.
Hi. Did you ever encounter any problems with the making of any of your films that were concerning to you in terms of what the output would be? Anything that might affect the quality of what you were trying to put out?
Well, I've only made 2 films for studios. Creepshow wound up being distributed by Warner Brothers, but it was produced by UATC, an independent company. We shot the film, it was complete. We took it to Cannes, and Warner Brothers bought it to show it. Land of the Dead was done by Mark Kenton, another independent producer, and Universal bought it. So those were not, I didn't make those pictures for a studio. The only times I've worked for a studio, and actually I only once, because the first one was also, when we made Monkey Shines, it was financed by a small independent producer in New York, Charles Edwards, and sold to Orion. So then, when Steve gave me the rights to the Dark Half, I went back to Orion and got the deal with Orion. So that's really the only picture that I ever made that was actually financed by a studio. However, Monkey Shines, once Orion picked it up, they said, they gave me, the 2 times I've had big problems was with both of those Orion pictures. They forced me to change the ending of Monkey Shines. And they wound up they wound up basically going bankrupt. They wound up changing all the ending of the Dark Half. The last reel was never finished. It was never scored. We had to pirate music from the other reels in order to score the last reel. And the special effects in the last reel are garbage. And I think the movie plays pretty well up until that last 10 minutes. Yes, those are the two times, and they were both Orion. They were guys that were just typical. They were business guys that had no affection for the medium, didn't care about movies at all. Just look at what they gave up. They thought Silence of the Lambs was a turkey. They sold it off. They thought Dances with Wolves was a bomb. They sold it off. They kept garbage. And that's why they went back. Bull Durham, they thought was a piece of shit.
Stephen King's in Creepshow, and he was not an actor, so I was wondering, what was it like directing him, and did you have to do a lot of takes?
No, Steve is a ham. I mean, really a complete ham. He still, I think, has it in for me because I said, Steve, think of this as a Coyote Roadrunner movie. It should be that broad, play it that silly. And he still blames me for it.
He definitely played it silly, there's no doubt about it.
No doubt about it.
Media shit.
Sorry first.
Hi George, I'd just like to say thank you a lot as a native from Monroeville, Pennsylvania, and the city of Pittsburgh and what you've done for our city, because we still have our zombie watch every Halloween, practically the week after we are it's ginormous. Every time I watch Night of the Living Dead, it's surreal for me because I'm local. Basically, my question was going to be, I know you don't live in Pittsburgh anymore, and obviously you're not filming currently anything, but would you ever come back to Pittsburgh to film since you're kind of trying to go back to those original roots, or would you still ever visit?
I'd love to shoot there. It's pretty hard because I've been living in Canada since Land of the Dead, actually, and it's pretty hard to beat the financing up there. So I don't think that I would ever come back to Pittsburgh to shoot a feature. I should never say never. Pittsburgh really wanted to get Land of the Dead because basically I wrote it for Pittsburgh. And that was supposed to look like the Golden Triangle. And I wanted to use the PPG building instead of for Fiddler Screen. And Pittsburgh was all for it, but we could never get, the Film Commission, Pennsylvania Film Commission would never gave us anywhere close to what Canada gave us. And I wound up not making the decision, it was the producers that made the decision to do Land of the Dead in Toronto. I had shot a film prior to that called Bruiser in Toronto. And I loved, I actually saw it. Amazing. And fell in love with the city, fell in love with the crews, the work ethic. It's wonderful out there. So I doubt that I would ever get or be able to convince a producer to shoot a feature film in Pittsburgh. I'm not working at a budget level where you can shoot where you want to shoot. Shoot what's the best place for the story. I work at a level where you have to be as economical as possible. However, I am actually starting. Tom Savini has a makeup school in Monessen, PA. Do you know? Does anybody know that?
Oh, yeah.
Woo! At the same facility, I now have a Romero School of Films. I will be there. Hope to shoot some, little student projects and some, maybe some little stuff that we can do under the radar.
Great. Great, we're going to do one more from the audience. And Jay over here is waving frantically.
George, can you talk about Diary of the Dead and just like Night of the Living Dead, how important it was for this decade with voyeurism, with the aspect of technology, and how impactful the story is that if it's not filmed, it didn't exist?
Well, Diary, I wanted to do something about citizen media, citizen journalism, which I find, even though it's wide open and it should be healthy, I find it dangerous. So I wanted to do something about that. And that was it. I mean, I came up with that idea of what would happen if, and I had to go back to the first night of when the dead are just coming back to life and beginning to walk. Because I wanted to make a film about students that get caught up in documenting these events. So I started again with the first night, and that basically was it. I wanted to do it all without edits, and sort of somewhere halfway through the film, we found that the pace was just too slow with no edits at all. And so halfway through the film, we came up with the idea that, well, if we showed how it was edited and why it was edited, that we could get away with an edit here or there. But there are some amazing shots in it that are single takes. Adam Sweeka, the guy that shot it, a good friend of mine, who also shot Survival and Bruiser, by the way, all the way goes back to Bruiser. Made some incredible shots, wonderful TV. I couldn't have done it without him. And anyway, that was the idea. And I hope, I don't know if it ever really had an impact, but it was something that I just wanted to say. And I'm glad that it's out there. So I like it a lot.
Well, that's really what great filmmaking is. You're saying what you really want to say.
Yeah.
Right. I want to end this by saying that I think it was probably about a month ago, Horror News Network, the website that puts on Connecticut Horror Fest, saw the story and was able to post the story that after many years, you're finally getting a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Well, thank you, and thanks to Chris Rowe, who really made it happen. I have to tell you that I have mixed feelings about it.
I was hoping.
You know, when I'm a member of the Academy, that's an invitational thing. They invite you in because of your body of work. The Hall of Fame stars are basically, it's the city of Los Angeles, as I understand it, and people lobby for it and contribute to it and all of that. So on the one hand, I'm grateful to friends who, you know, made it happen. On the other hand, it's not really invitational. You know, I felt better about my invitation into the Academy because it was purely based on work.
Yep. Interesting. Okay. Thank you. I want to end it there with Mr. Romero. Please, all loud round of applause.
Connecticut HorrorFest. And this year, we got George Romero to come to Connecticut.
guys are just like me, true horror fans, and we respect this man's creations and every other guest that was here today. I want to thank our guests that were here, all of our volunteers, and our staff who put this together. And most of all, I'd like to thank my wife who carries the burden of putting HorrorFest.
Supporting the HorrorFest, all our guests here today, and especially our staff and volunteers who work relentlessly throughout the HorrorFest. So thank you to everybody. Thank you for coming out. We hope to see you again next year. Thank you.
One more time, guys.